In this module, we're going to look at the maintenance and repair obligations that you will have as the letting agent, that the landlord will have, and that the tenant will have. So in any tenanted property, things break down periodically and need to be repaired and replaced. It's rare that any tenant will take responsibility for these or take responsibility for carrying out routine maintenance. So it's reasonable that the landlord carries out the maintenance or engages contractors to do that. And of course, as the managing agent, it's going to fall on you to make sure that these things are arranged and that the maintenance and repairs take place. But remember, there's always a balance to be found. The tenant will expect or demand that a minor problem is rectified immediately when it's not financially prudent to get out of hours contracts to do it. So, for example, a leaky tap, what you need to do is you need to categorise how you're going to deal with such a thing. So there will be category A situations where immediate action is required. So there's no time to delay. We've got a major leak, we've got a fire, we've got a failure of a central heating system, we've got an electrical fault. These are category A, they need immediate action. Category B would be urgent situations, but they're not really required to be dealt with immediately. So these can be repaired within a few days, 2 or 3 days. So a broken cooker or washing machine, a fence is broken, blown down, one of the 2 toilets in the property isn't flushing properly. These are urgent situations that need action, but they don't immediately require action. And then we have category C, which are minor issues which can be scheduled within a programme of repairs and maintenance. So stiff windows, broken gates, noisy hinges, leaking taps can all be scheduled to be dealt with in the next round of routine maintenance visits. You should also have a list of preferred contractors. You need to have a selection of contractors you can call on to do repairs and maintenance within your timescales. And so make sure that you've got this list. Look for recommendations for contractors. Thoroughly vet contractors. Ensure that they are appropriately qualified and registered to carry out the work that you engage them in. Obtain insurance certificates from them. Remember, insurance is annual, so you need to get renewal certificates each year, but having appropriate insurance in place is vitally important for these contractors. The best contractor for the job is the one that provides the right service in the right time for the right price for your landlord. It's not the one that provides you with the right commission. Always remember, you must act in the best interests of your landlord. In relation to payments for contractors, then it's best practice to get the landlord's agreement for you to hold afloat. What that float will be dependent on the landlord, dependent on the property, but £100 to £500 is the norm. Get your client to give you authority to make decisions regarding the cost of maintenance work and repairs, up to the float amount perhaps. This makes managing the work much easier and makes settling contractors' accounts a lot simpler also. Contractors must be aware that they're working for the landlord, not for you. You are just the agent acting on behalf of the landlord, and in all situations the landlord's name should appear on any invoices that are issued. It's not advisable to arrange works on the basis that funds will be available out of next month's rent, as the funds might not come. Therefore, when planning works, it's prudent to retain funds from previous rental payments to cover the costs of works that are anticipated, or in the case of larger works, perhaps build up the funding over a few months. If you get the maintenance wrong and you don't perform the functions you should be performing, then the landlord can find themselves in breach of a tenancy agreement and find themselves having additional liabilities because of your failures. This can occur quite easily if you're not on top of everything that's happening. If you delay a washing machine repair, the tenant incurs expenses at laundrettes. The landlord may have to pay compensation. If you don't deal with the roof leak that's been reported by the tenant and you don't deal with it quickly, then this may result in the tenant having furniture that's been water damaged. The landlord may have to pay compensation. And it might come back to you if it's occurred due to your failure or your delay. Additionally, as a letting agent, make sure you know when the building's insurance needs to be renewed and advise the landlord to do it. If a slate falls from the roof and injures the tenant, a claim could be made against the landlord personally if that insurance is not in place. A good tenancy agreement will give the landlord and the agent a right of access to visit the property. Even if it's not stated in the tenancy agreement, there is an implied obligation on the tenant to allow access. Without this, a landlord would never be able to check that the tenant was looking after the property correctly, or carry out any inspections to assess what maintenance work was required. The frequency of property visits differ from agent to agent, and this should be outlined within your terms of business. But if they're too frequent, the tenant could see you as a nuisance, and you risk claims of not allowing the tenant quiet enjoyment. Best practice would be for the visits to be scheduled every 3 to 6 months. Now, you will find tenants that refuse you access. If you're planning to visit the property, you should arrange this with the tenant and give them at least 24 hours written notice in advance. You are entitled to conduct these visits without the tenant being present, but it is best practice to give them the opportunity to be present, if only for security reasons. If an appointment is not convenient for the tenant and they would like to be present, then an alternative date and time should be arranged with them. If they continue to refuse, then this should set off alarm bells. If they don't want you to see the property, what might they be trying to hide? Ultimately, the only way the tenant can be compelled to allow access is with a court order. Tenants will also be in breach of tenancy agreements, and you should have an internal procedure for dealing with breaches of contract by the tenant. So when it occurs, you should have telephone conversations to discuss the issue and attempt to resolve it. You should have a process for writing letters to confirm exactly what the problem is and how the breaches in the tenancy can be resolved. Make it clear what you expect and the timeframes you expect it in. If this fails, discuss the matter with the landlord, agree a course of action. If it's an assured short-hold tenancy, then action may be possible under the Housing Act to recover possession of the property, providing the tenant has resided there for over 6 months. This would normally be dealt with by a solicitor who specialises in landlord and tenant disputes.